One in five suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
That's right.
We are so happy to be back live in studio with our sweetie and our guest. I feel like
Marla, what have we been doing? Where have we been?
Hold on. I feel like, let me stop myself. Am I moving myself or am I moving? Dave and I were on a cruise,
yes and yes.
a smooth jazz cruise for 2 weeks. And I feel like that every building is still a ship.
Yeah, that's true. Like Marla said, we were on the Smooth Jazz Cruise, a Michael Lazaroff production. I had to work there for a couple of weeks, and our schedules have been so hectic, I thought Marla could use the rest as well.
So I didn't even know I was on the ship for the first week.
But resting for 2 weeks is a lot. It takes work to rest for 2 weeks.
And you know what? I want to start the year off right. We want to remind everybody to text the word GIVE to 818-698-1021 because we need your help to erase the stigma.
GIVE is the word to text to 818-698-1021. Our guest today is Sarah Myers. Sarah is a writer for Psychology Today. Her writing primarily focuses on psychosis and the schizophrenia spectrum of disorders. She has firsthand knowledge about the subject and is going to give us a personal insight on dealing with our loved ones who deal with some similar issues. When we come back, we'll be talking with Sarah Myers. Don't move.
Can't wait.
When Dave and Marla get together, it's hot.
Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley believe it doesn't take much to make life a little better for our neighbors, coworkers, friends, our family members, even our children who suffer with mental illness. When you support our A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign, you are doing your part to erase the stigma surrounding mental illness. For just $1 today, or $1 a day for 1 week, just $7, we can look forward to a future that does not include the unfortunate and uncomfortable stares, bullying, and the subsequent isolation that our loved ones who suffer with brain differences deal with. Text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to 818-698-1021 to donate. A dollar today keeps the stigma away. Brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley.
All right. While Marla is dealing with some technical issues, we want to welcome Sarah Myers. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to talk to you.
Sarah, right quick, I just have to ask. We told all about where we were and now where we are. Tell us where you are.
Yeah, well, I'm in my apartment, my living area space in Brooklyn, New York. I go to school here and I work primarily here.
Okay, that is awesome. Now, we're going to jump right into the conversation because you speak pretty openly about the way brain differences, or maybe sometimes I think your phrase might be neurologically divergent. And I like that as well. We thought we were clever with brain difference, and we didn't even make that one up.
Absolutely.
We just stole it from somebody. But we just love it. We love it so much. But you're so open about the impact on both you and your family. And why don't we start the conversation there and tell us a little bit about the history of the background of brain difference or neurological divergency in your family?
Yeah, so well, we use the term neurodivergence,
okay.
Actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's not neurological. It's a little more shortened version. Neurodivergent.
Neurodivergence. And basically, my family on my dad's side has a huge, long history with schizophrenia.
Okay.
Half the kids out of the 6 kids of my grandparents had schizophrenia, full blown.
Wow.
One of them died from schizophrenia. That was written from his birth certificate.
Wow.
And the other one had schizophrenia from when she was 14 until she was in her 60s, and she passed away during COVID.
So wait a minute. So I have to ask one quick question because I understand death as a result of some of the consequence or the behaviors of mental illness. Is that what you mean? I've never heard anyone say that it was written on a death certificate that schizophrenia was the cause of death.
Yeah, we were confused too, honestly. I think that some people just found my uncle in his house, and the death certificate just plainly said schizophrenia. It's very unusual.
Right. Because they're not quite sure exactly what happened, but they knew he suffered with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Wow.
and so we didn't mean to cut you off. You were saying that's a part of the history of your family. I guess the other side of that would be, and so how did that have to do with you? I mean, how did you find out that you suffer with some of the same issues?
So my illness, I eventually got diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, but it kind of manifested as depression when I was around 13 or 12. And it kind of caused a schism in my family. My parents really didn't know what to do with me. It was a hassle each day getting me out of bed to go to school. And by the time I was late in high school, I basically just gave up, and my grades were not doing well, and I wasn't able to go to the college I wanted until later in life. And yeah.
So Sarah, I have a quick question, because this is something that and I don't know if you know about our history, but we too have 2 of our 3 children with various issues that are mental health related, mental health challenges. Can you explain to everybody the difference between schizoaffective and having schizophrenia?
Yeah, so schizoaffective disorder has the bipolar component to it. Schizophrenia will have your hallucinations, which are called positive symptoms. You'll have delusions. You'll have a lack of affect, actually, and affect is the scientific term for emotions.
Right.
You'll have blunted affect. You won't be able to feel emotions as deeply. And then schizoaffective disorder is the opposite. So I have schizoaffective bipolar type, which means I get manic and depressed, and I feel my emotions very deeply.
Wow.
And so when did you, I don't know if you already mentioned this, but when did you start going to therapy for this? And when was this diagnosis?
So I mean, the beginning of my therapy started when I was 13. But we didn't address hallucinations and delusions until I was 23. I had recently gone off of all my medications, and then that's when we kind of figured out that I was actually hallucinating at 23. And then I saw a psychiatrist who basically sat me down and said I was psychotic.
Now, how did that actually make you feel? Because we have a similar story, almost identical, dealing with our son. But how did you actually choose to accept someone else actually confirming that you were having delusions? And because I'm sure to you it felt almost real.
Yeah, I was really shocked and really, I mean, up until that point for a whole year, I believed that I was basically like a rock star. I was like the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci. I thought I was Jesus. So I thought I had some good things going for me. And when my psychiatrist sat me down and told me that, I was really embarrassed, and I felt so much shame, which is an experience I think not enough of people with the disorder go through. Because once somebody tells you that you have this disorder, it's a real blow to your ego, and your psychotic ego. And I think most people don't want to face that process, or don't really know how to move through those emotions.
Wow.
And I forget your second question. What was the second part?
You were asking how
first of all, I think you did answer the question, because I was asking at what age did you first start dealing with therapy, and when did you get the diagnosis? And basically you said you've been in therapy since you were 13, but didn't realize about the actual diagnosis that you're dealing 23. With now, your current diagnosis, until you're about 23. And that was after an episodic break that you were describing. So we appreciate, again, your transparency.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're asking these types of questions is because we've been on the other side dealing with our son who has the exact same diagnosis. And so that being said, I understand from actually having conversations with him that there are times when it's difficult for him to accept that when we tell him that these things aren't real, because to him they're absolutely real.
Yeah, I think I remember the last part of your question, what made me come around to seeing that. And I think that I really looked up to people in the media, and I met some activists and speakers really passionate about their work. And I really saw an example of how life could be. When I was living in Missouri, I was really depressed, and I felt like I wasn't surrounded by the creativity and life that I really wanted to live, that I now live in New York. And so I realized that I would miss out on that whole life if I didn't confront my disorder. And actually, my disorder was limiting me and preventing me from living my dreams.
Wow.
That is.
I find that to be amazing. Not only that,
and I don't want to understate that. That's the issue. Go ahead, Marla.
No, I just wanted to say that, I feel like these conversations are almost spirit-led because as a parent, there are a lot of times, to be honest, most of the time at this point where I have gotten to the point where I feel completely hopeless. I still love, I'm still participating, I'm still praying every day, but the reality is you begin to feel hopeless at listening to you and understanding that there was something that got through. Because my question now to you would be, when you're in an episode, what is it that triggers you personally to make a decision to get treatment or to change that reality? Because I see that there's like parallel worlds. It doesn't mean anything other than the fact that over there I can't relate because I can't see what you feel is real. And over here, you're now detached from anything that is real for me. So explain that to me just a little bit, if you could. What allows you to break through when you're in an episode?
So I have some strategies in place. For one, my dad has always been a number one support for me. He's always been there since the beginning, during my whole mental health recovery phase since I was 13. He was the one taking me to therapy. And so I always trusted him, and I had a trusting relationship in my life where I could always call him if I felt like something was off. And when I'm heading into a psychotic episode, I can usually feel when my brain is shifting from the reality that everyone else feels and the one that I'm heading into. I think I've learned to kind of monitor my internal emotions and my relationship to the reality really well, to the point where I think people are really surprised that I'm able to do that, because I know when the shift is happening.
Okay,
yeah.
No, I was just gonna say we got to hear the rest of this. If you can hold on to that thought, we're gonna take a quick break and we're gonna come right back to the thought that you're speaking on. So okay. Stay with us. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more conversation with Sarah.
Absolutely.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
Many children, and especially adolescents, experience mood swings as a normal part of growing up. But when these feelings persist and interfere with the child's ability to function in daily life, bipolar disorder could be the cause.
Symptoms can begin in early childhood, but usually emerge in adolescent or adulthood. Until recently, young people were rarely diagnosed with this disorder. Yet, up to 1/3 of the 3.4 million children and teens with depression in the United States may be experiencing the early onset of bipolar disorder, according to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychology.
Many teens with bipolar disorder abuse alcohol and drugs to escape and should be evaluated for a mental disorder. If an addiction develops, it is essential to treat both the mental health disorder and the substance abuse problem at the same time.
Bipolar disorder is treatable. Early identification, diagnosis, and treatment will help children reach their full potential. Children who exhibit signs of bipolar disorder should be evaluated by a mental health professional who specializes in treating children.
This message is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Dave is a thinker.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically live my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
All right, Sarah, we got to jump right back into this conversation. You were explaining what it is like inside of you and inside your diagnosis when you become episodic and how you manage that. And you were just talking about, beginning to understand when you're moving in that direction. And so that's where we left.
And I also I wanted to sort of reiterate, because I didn't want to let it be misunderstood that where you are, the culture that you have trained or disciplined yourself to be able to work with is not something that is easy to do. Because we have heard countless stories and testimonies of parents who are dealing with children, especially once they get over the age of 21, because at that point, they don't have to listen to you technically. They don't have to take your advice. So you had more than one really great thing going for you, your relationship and your trust in your father, as well as your awareness of the things that you wanted for your own life, and an understanding that your diagnosis, the things that you were dealing with were not necessarily the diagnosis, that's the wrong word, but the issues that you were dealing with could potentially keep you from reaching your goals. And that is huge, because without that, there are much longer stints of not being on your medication, not actually being cooperative with your therapist, and to having more difficult relationships with the people that you live with and that you're around every day.
Yeah, well, I will say that I dealt with all of that, definitely. Like I said, when my disorder presented itself again at 23, I had already been through therapy for 10 years. So I think I had a lot of grounding work to prepare me for the crazy emotions that came with the full-blown episode. But through those 10 years, I had already built that rapport with my dad and my therapist. I had learned to trust the mental health industry instead of being afraid of it. I had learned to combat any internalized stigma about mental illness. I will say that when I had the diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, the internalized stigma was so much.
Wow.
And I had to even walk myself and talk myself out of the stigma that came with psychotic disorders. But basically, I just had my dad constantly reiterate me, this isn't real, this isn't real. And I didn't want to take medications for 6 years.
Wow.
And I fought. I manipulated my psychiatrist. I manipulated my dad. And I basically said, I don't believe this. I think they're going to hurt me instead of help me. And all the side effects aren't worth it. But and now I really value medications, and there's a whole stereotype or myth that medications make you feel less deeply, and they don't make you who you are before your diagnosis. So you completely change as a person. And I think people are afraid of that. But I will say that the medications help you actually do more. And you still have access to your creative side. You still have access to do good work. It's just different. That's all.
Wow, that's amazing. You know what? What you just said is worth actually another guest visit on the show.
No, I'm not even kidding.
Because we can talk
powerful.
for a couple of episodes just about that
that's
right
powerful.
there. And I have to stop and say we are really proud of you and the progress and the discipline and the way that you have managed your life so far. Of course, nobody's perfect. There are always ups and downs, but I've never heard a more complete handle. So let's let's turn the corner a little bit, and this might help Marla as well, because you're passionate about the science of the brain as well as the philosophy of the mind, and we can hear it just as you speak. You speak with a natural authority. Talk to us about that, and how you think there needs to be more communication, like you said, between, as you were just telling you about the way that you've dealt with it. A lot of people are afraid to actually talk about some of this subject matter because it exposes, number one, the fact that they're afraid of one thing or the other, one attribute or the other, with having to deal with symptoms like these. But you think there should be more communication between the scientific community and those who actually suffer, who are, I shouldn't say suffer, are neurodivergent, as you would say, or brain different, as we would say.
Yeah, I was always intellectually inclined. I think I grew up in an intellectual household. My dad was very into science and critical reasoning. Both my parents are engineers, or they were engineers. Like the conversations at my dinner table when I was 7 was very scientific, and my
Yeah.
dad would answer with like a very scientific answer. And he would always make me question things. So I kind of, the intellect and the passion for science and truth, like really was put in me from really young. So that's another thing I had going for me, which I think saved me ultimately. And the more I went to college and I majored in psychology, and I really found that psychology as a field is so new and so imperfect still, that there's so much room for growth, especially from people who are recovering from their disorders, to inform the type of studies that are being funded by these huge organizations like the National Institutes of Health, or mental health, I should say. And because basically there's a huge schism between scientists, researchers, and people who live with it. And that's actually an ongoing debate right now, and several people are currently arguing about that.
I have a personal question. So you mentioned your mom and your dad, and so your mom is also in your life, yes? So
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. So that's an interesting point, because my mom is a Vietnamese refugee.
Okay.
So I had a lot of cultural issues with coming to terms and making her understand that I have a mental illness, and she still doesn't think that I have a mental illness today.
Wow.
So having those conversations cross-culturally was kind of difficult, because I think in Vietnam, mental illness is not really
right.
celebrated or like health concern.
Okay, so I was just, so you answered that, because I was looking for help as well with what you speak, Sarah, so freely about the connection you have with your dad, and one of the things that I personally struggle with is my kids seeming to relate, well, the ones who are neurodivergent. We're both in their lives, and both are there. Matter of fact, I've been the one in the house, so I'm like, my brain said, wonder why she chose her father instead of her mother to be the one, but now that makes sense. So I don't have any further questions about that. That's clear.
Yeah, well, you were mentioning that how the field of psychology seems so new, and I guess the thing about it is because you're dealing with not just the brain, but then how the brain and where it almost gets into metaphysical in nature. When you start saying how that deals with the mind, how that generates how you perceive yourself, how you perceive the world around you. And because of that, everybody's blood chemistry is different. So it is always hard for a lot of people to understand that when you're treating a mental health issue, you have to titrate medication. It's not like we know for if you have pancreatic cancer, if your blood levels are this, you take this medical regimen and you're either going to get better or that's what we can do for it. It seems like in mental health, there are many medicines that could help specific issues, and they're not the same for everyone that actually end up being the medicine that works or the dosage that works for everybody. So it's almost like a trial and error field. And I'm not sure that that's a new thing or that it's almost impossible to nail it down more specifically. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, there's very expensive tests that you can do in psychiatry to kind of determine what medications you will react positively to and which ones will have an effect on you and which ones will have a negative effect on you. That has been around for some time now, at least 10 years, because when I was talking to my psychiatrist when I was about 17, he mentioned that. But like I said, the process is imperfect.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to touch on that when we come back from this next break as well, and let you continue along that line of conversation, because
this is amazing.
It's very important, and I'll just have to say we're going to have you back sooner than later as a guest again, if you're willing, and we appreciate you. We'll be back with more of our conversation with Sarah Myers in just a minute. All right, that music says she's shaking her head, but it's pole time. She's swaying. She's doing more of a nice, easy dance where she's actually practicing her
I'm still on the ship.
two-step.
This is
just by herself.
This is called a ship sway day.
I like it. I like
as
it.
much dancing. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm back.
Well, like we said at the beginning of the show, we've been away for a little over a couple of weeks, and now that we're back, we're going to jump back into the conversation and remind you what our poll question was a few weeks ago. Marla, what was that poll question?
The poll question a few weeks ago read as follows: what percentage of Americans live with a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression?
And I don't even remember what the guest answered, but we know what the actual answer is.
They answered correctly.
Okay.
But the choices were 1%, 4%, and 7%. And Sarah, we'll give you a chance to hop in that and cast your vote. So I'm going to give it to you again. What percentage of Americans live with a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression? 1%, 4%, or 7?
Oh, 7 maybe.
Okay. Well, that's
understandable.
It's understandable.
But the actual answer is 4% deal with a serious mental illness such as schizophrenia, bipolar, or major depression of all Americans.
But hold on, Sarah.
You have another chance to redeem yourself.
There's more.
What percentage of Americans, here's our poll question, our new poll question that we'll give the answer to next week. What percentage of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in their lifetime? 27%, 46%, or 62%? Again, the question, what percentage of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in their lifetime? 27%, 46%, or 62%? What's your guess?
I think it's 27%.
Okay.
I should know these things, but
you know what? You know why? Because we realized a long time ago that the polls, sometimes they're not even
depending on how the poll question is sourced or what the answer was given. It just happens to be
it's very
just
rare.
Fun for us to discuss. Sometimes we even stump doctors.
Right.
So don't take it too hard. But we appreciate you playing, and for those of you watching, stay tuned to our social media. You'll have a chance to actually vote on the question as well. Be right back to the show. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for playing.
And I also want to say as well, thank you always for the participation that we have on the chat room. Remember, to join us every Monday with Mental Health Mondays. This is an amazing conversation with our guest, Sarah Myers. Okay, Sarah, take it away, Dave.
Sarah, so right before we went to the last break, you were really digging into sort of the process and explaining to us why psychology feels so new, but it seemed like you started turning the corner into saying to get more specific information, that testing is just way too expensive for most people to actually have, and so they then have to do with the way the system works for those who don't have that much money.
Right. Well, that's the nature of being a new field. The way we practice psychiatry and psychology today is very new within the last 70 years or so, I would say. Freud and Jung started psychotherapy on their couches at the beginning of the 20th century. So given all this time, these 3,000 years that we've had civilization, this is pretty new. And because of that, all these new advances are just now coming out, these research findings and everything. So the treatments will be very expensive, really, when they first come on the market. That's the same with pharmaceuticals. That's the same with genetic testing and everything. So I think that's why that is.
That's a good point.
That's a very good point. So which actually leads to that there's hope, because the more that this becomes normalized within society, those costs will eventually come down.
Except at the same time, we have to also lament that, unfortunately, the critical mass of mental health, those who are seriously affected by mental health, has now overtaken the curve, in my opinion, of affordable care. There's so many more people, which is 1 in 3, that needs to have some type of, actual intervention or treatment, and now here we are, and a lot of times, like you say, we're just not there yet.
Absolutely. Now, Sarah, again, we have to thank you so much for being a guest. We've We've learned so many things, and you have truly given us a new perspective from the side of someone who can who actually understand both sides of the issue, being healthy and actually dealing with a break of some sort and coming back from that.
And Dave and I are very careful, but one of the things I would love to have you on the show at a time that if you felt safe with that, just talking about what it is like to be inside the psychosis, because that's really something I am desperate to kind of understand, where that rests and what that looks like to the person who's actually in that space.
Again,
Yeah, I would love to.
Oh, that's music to our ears.
Yeah, that has to be we want to have another episode with you and literally inside the psychosis. So
what is give us a parting thought or a final message? And I know that you've spoken to our producer, one of our producers, Hannah, and you talked about a dream that you have of a world where no one thinks twice about seeking help for the things that they need help for.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to keep in mind that America and the Western world is the most advanced in mental health care. We have the least stigma, even though the stigma seems still deep. The rest of the world is still developing. There's a shortage of psychiatrists and a shortage of mental health practitioners. And I think one day I really hope that we break that stigma and just feel absolutely no shame in speaking out and don't think twice about speaking out about mental health problems in a similar way that we take care of first aid.
Awesome.
Awesome.
We second that thought and that dream. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And support you and love the fact that you've used your voice here. And we say all the time, every conversation about mental health is one worth having and hearing. So
again, our guest has been Sarah Myers. And Sarah, actually, I don't know if we said this, she is a writer for Psychology Today, so we appreciate you. We appreciate your knowledge, your willingness to share.
Absolutely.
For those of you who actually follow Mental Health Mondays with Marlon and Dave, our guests next week are Mark and Robbie Wahlberg. We can't wait to talk to them. It's actually going to be near Valentine's Day, so it's going to be a very good conversation.
We need to make some room on this table.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you guys for watching. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.